Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Danilo Caprick here, aka still the best dressed man in tech sales. And in today's video, we're going to dive deep on a very, very interesting topic within communication. What we're going to talk about specifically is how on earth do we become more convicted sounding speakers? How do we sound more convincing in our conversations? And how do we bring a high degree of energy which can help us become more engaging and fun to listen to from our audience, all right? And the reason we want to get into this topic today, guys, is because a lot of people are asking, how do I sound more convincing? How can I bring a high degree of conviction to my conversations? And overall, how do I become a better speaker? Don't worry, we're going to address all these questions right now. All right, guys, so the first thing we want to address when it comes to being a more convicted and convincing sounding speaker is tone and inflection, okay? Tone and inflection. What I mean by tone and inflection is the volume, the speed, the cadence, and the pace at which you speak. And I think a good visual to keep in mind for everybody listening here is think about a roller coaster, okay? A good roller coaster usually has high points, low points, and the really good ones have loop-de-loops, right? What I mean by that is they're not a straight line, okay? Only the little kid ones that are not that super fun or not that interesting go in a straight line like this. So think about your conversations, think about the structure of your communication to be like a roller coaster, right? Have a high point, have a low point, have times where you're in loop-de-loops and doing the unexpected, all right? But I know you're probably like, yeah, it's a cool visual, Danilo, but like, how do I really do that? Well, here are some tangible things you can do and play with in your conversation to come off as more convincing and compelling. Number one, play with the speed of your communication, right? Notice how I just said that part very slow, and then other parts in this video I'm gonna talk very fast. There's a very different effect that comes with that kind of speed, all right? If we're talking slow and quietly, it usually signals to our audience that we're going to say something very important or very insightful, and they might want to listen up, right? Whereas when we're being loud and speaking fast, maybe it's a point of high energy where we just said a joke or something else to lighten the mood, whatever it is. But the point is, guys, that there's variation. We're not just being slow the whole time, and we're not just being fast the whole time. We're doing a combination of both, just like I did right there. Did you see that? If you really caught that, that means you're listening now. The other thing that we can play with is, aside from volume and speed, is our tone, right? So tone means the level of sincerity, the level of seriousness that we have. So you might hear me emphasize certain points and come off as very serious, while other times you might hear me come off as very soft, like such, right? And we want to do that when we're illustrating or emphasizing different points in the conversation. When we want to come off as aggressive and really put the exclamation point on something, then we want to tighten up that pace, right? We want to go ahead and make it sound like that. If we want something to come across as a little more gentle or safe, then we might want to adjust our pitch accordingly, right? So that's what I mean when I talk about tone and inflection. We have to play with all those little variables that can help us avoid sounding monotone, avoid sounding boring. And if you do all these things right, it's gonna help you become more interesting, more convincing, and more compelling as a speaker when you're in front of your audience. All right, guys, so the second thing we want to do, again, to become a more convincing and convicted sounding speaker is we want to maintain strong eye contact. And I know this isn't a secret. You guys have been told a million times from a different million books that you need to have good eye contact. But they don't really go into why you need good eye contact. So let's talk about it. Number one, when you hold strong eye contact between you and your listener, you and your audience, whoever it is, you convey a tone of seriousness. For example, if I decide to start looking at this direction for the rest of the video, you might be thinking, is that person really talking to me? Are their words really meant for me? Maybe these words weren't even meant for me, they were meant for somebody else, right? And so my level of seriousness, or your perception of how serious I am towards you, might drop because I'm not giving you the eye contact, right? So that's one reason why eye contact is super important, is because it conveys a tone of seriousness and also tells the listener, in this case, that your words are for them and nobody else, which makes them focus on you a lot more than they would usually. On the flip side, you guys, when we are the ones that are listening and other people are speaking to us, it's really important that we engage with strong eye contact, because it sends a subtle message to the speaker saying that, hey, what you're saying is important, and I'm gonna give you my undivided attention and make sure you know I'm listening to you, and I'm gonna do that by having strong eye contact. The second that I pull out my phone, or I look at the computer, or I break eye contact and do something else, all of a sudden the other person gets a little clue or a little ounce of doubt that, maybe I'm not so interested. Maybe the person really doesn't care. And so it's a way for us as listeners to communicate, hey, we care about what you're saying is important, and I'm gonna be here to listen to you no matter what. Okay, so when it comes to two-way communication and we're on the receiving end, it's also in our best interest to have strong eye contact, because that's going to let the other person know that, hey, we care about what you're saying, we're hearing you, and what you're saying is important. All right, guys, the next point that we want to focus on is body language. All right, and body language is super important because whether you know it or not, there might be times in a conversation, whether you're in a social setting or you're presenting in a business audience, where you actually position your body to look less confident. So obviously we don't want that. We want to position ourselves for high confidence, but how exactly do we do that? It's pretty simple, guys. What we want to first do when it comes to body language in most settings is we want to avoid closing ourselves off and making ourselves appear small. Okay? In fact, what we want to do is the opposite. We want to open our bodies up and we want to appear as large as possible. And if you haven't heard about this already, this is the technique that politicians use when they speak to politicians. This is what kings would do when they spoke with other kings. And they did it all to assert dominance and let the other audience know, or the other listeners know, that, hey, I'm confident here and I'm coming from a position of dominance. All right? So again, avoid folding yourself. Don't close your arms. Don't do anything that makes yourself seem small, but instead just do the opposite. Make yourself appear as large as possible. That way you're sending an unconscious message to your audience saying, hey, I'm confident in what I'm saying and you should believe me because I'm so confident. All right? So that's the first thing with body language. Avoid being small. Try your best to be big, and that way you send the message, hey, I'm confident and I know what I'm talking about. All right, guys, the next point that we want to cover with body language is use your hands. All right, use your hands. And if you're not using your hands and you're just keeping them like this the whole conversation, you're really missing a big opportunity to accentuate the words you are saying. All right, for example, think about this video where you've been watching me tell you about this topic. 90% of the time my hands have been moving, right? And I've been using my hands because guess what? If my words are not enough, you now have something else to focus on in the conversation, which is my hands, all right? And so if I'm being boring, if there's a point that's not resonating, your mind still has something to pay attention to, which is my hands, all right? So in the case that our words are not enough, we can count on our hands to still occupy the listener and give them something to think about or see while we're speaking. The other thing to point out is that using our hands, moving our hands in any way, can accentuate at times the words that we're saying. For example, if we're talking about job cuts, right? There's a lot of layoffs in the market right now. And we do this with our hands, it really emphasizes the point, right? There are job cuts left and right? That's a way to accentuate what we're saying. At the same time, if we want to talk about something incredibly gentle, we might want to open our hands like this and use a gesture that conveys gentleness or the fact that we're not hiding something. So again, using your hands in conversation is a great way to emphasize and accentuate the words you are saying and give people additional context clues to understand the way you want to come off, right? Have you ever been in a situation where somebody perceived what you said in a way that you did not intend for it to come across? If you were to use your body language and your hands to accentuate your points, you're actually giving them more material to better understand you. And so for that reason, we want to use our hands as much as possible because not only do we become more interesting and more confident, but it gives them more material to better understand our points. And so it's also a way to increase comprehension if you look at it from that standpoint. So overall, guys, use your hands as much as possible. If you're not using your hands, you're missing out on a big opportunity to accentuate everything that you're saying and making your points more clear to the listener. All right, guys, so at this point, we talked about tone and inflection, we talked about eye contact, and we talked about body language. When it came to tone and inflection, we talked about speaking like a roller coaster, right? Making sure that your conversation has high points, low points. You experiment with the speed and the tone and the pace at which you speak, because all of this can help you become a more interesting and compelling speaker. Also, it can make you sound more confident because you're controlling the pace in such a controlled, dedicated way, all right? Second thing we talked about is eye contact, right? When we are holding eye contact with the other person, it signals confidence, and also when we're listening to the other person, it signals to them that, hey, what you're saying matters and I care and I'm here to hear you out. So that will also help us become a more convicted and compelling speaker because we're showing them that we're confident by not breaking eye contact. And also when we're listening to them, we're saying that, hey, what you're saying matters and I'm here to hear you out. All right. Last thing that we said with body language was that we need to make sure we avoid being as small as possible, and we want to become as large as possible to accentuate our confident and dominant position. Okay. The other thing that we talked about is using your hands as much as possible to accentuate your points, and that's going to not only make you a more engaging and convicted speaker, but also give your audience a little more context with what you mean. So it'll help you become more easier to understand as well. All right, guys, so there you have it. Those are 3 specific strategies we talked about that can help you become a more convicted and convincing sounding speaker. So with that, I hope you enjoy the content. Hope you're able to put into practice and level up your own communication skills. And if you enjoyed the video today, please hit the subscribe button below. Also, if you're not doing so already, go follow me on LinkedIn, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Take it easy now.